Hello, this is Stephen Brooks yet again for my fourth video on how we can utilize Buddhist principles in hypnotherapy. In previous videos, I've talked about non-attachment, dependent origination, and compassion. So today I want to talk about how we integrate these as a therapeutic working model. Okay, let's start with the compassion. Okay, if you have compassion for your client will pick that up very, very quickly. You know, the reason for that is because you'll be giving 100% of yourself and your time to that client. So let's start at the beginning of the session. Okay, we take notes, we do an interview. You know, you're not going to be looking down, writing down answers. That shows that you're not observing the client. If you really want to demonstrate compassion to your client, first of all, consider that your life depends on it. That hour, your life depends on doing something for that client that makes an amazing change in their life. Make that your focus, so that's your intention. Secondly, you have to be with that client, ask questions that evoke responses that you can utilize either by discarding them because maybe they're irrational or maybe they're just interpretations that the client has made, and find out the relevant responses that you can use therapeutically. So with your information gathering, you are always listening and watching to find relevance. I don't mean relevance in terms of the story the client gives you being accurate. I'm talking about relevance in terms of what is relevant to help you bring about a change therapeutically. So it's observation, utilization. If we look at the work of Milton H. Erickson, this is one of his most important principles: observation, utilization. If you don't have observation, you have no raw materials to work with. So it's important to listen, to watch, ask questions, observe, and then when you've got that information, turn it around and think, can I utilize this therapeutically in some way? Or can I utilize that answer to promote another question to expand upon that particular answer? So it's always observe, utilize. And you know, from the very beginning of a session, if this is your commitment to the client will pick it up. The client will think, well, this is a different therapist. They are really, really interested in me. They really want to make a difference to me. So that's the initiation of the compassion. Of course, the compassion continues throughout the whole process, the whole therapy. Secondly, dependent origination. Well, this is the whole idea of cause and effect. One thing creates something, that then creates something else. So it's like a chain of causes and effects. It's a knock-on effect, like if you imagine dominoes knocking each other down. The difference with dominoes is they usually end, but with most clients, they go in a loop. So there's a thought, produces a feeling, the feeling produces a behavior, and then there's a thought about the behavior, which then produces a second feeling, produces more of the same behavior or changed behavior, which produces another thought and feeling, and that loops around and around and around. It's incredibly simple. So, if we do our information gathering based on trying to find out how this client is actually trapped in this loop, you'll be identifying, in fact, not so much the cause of the problem, but the way the client maintains it psychologically. And when you see how they maintain it just through that very simple process, it means therapy is effortless. You can see the strategy that the client is using unconsciously without realizing it, and how to change it, because now you've got the steps and you can then break that loop. Imagine getting a giant pair of scissors and cutting the loop at the top where the thought is and cutting the loop at the bottom where the feeling is. That loop can't run anymore. So how can you therapeutically cut that loop in two places, for example? So with the concept of dependent origination, cause and effect, you can identify the process that's maintaining the problem and then intervene to prevent that running. Let's now go on to the non-attachment principle. Well, you know, we have problems because we try and solve them. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But it is true. If you try and solve a problem and you can't, you've now got two problems. The first problem and the problem of not being able to solve it. If not being able to solve it makes you feel bad, you've now got three problems. The original problem, the problem of not being able to solve it, and now the feeling, the response of not being able to solve it. And see the loop? And round it goes. Okay. So in a way, by attaching to wanting to solve the problem, actually can make the problem worse. But the good news, because we use hypnosis, we can bypass the conscious limitations that the client brings in and access the unconscious mind that's running that loop and intervene to stop it running. You see, a client will have limited information available to them consciously. And the reason they come to you is because they can't fix the problem themselves. If they already had been able to fix the problem, they wouldn't be there. So the fact that they're there means they've been trying to do the same thing over and over again, usually in the same way, banging their head on the wall without any positive response. That's because they've been trying to think, why do I have my problem? But you know, when clients ask why, I often say to them, how will that make a difference? If you then know why, you've then got to do the how. And knowing why can sometimes make people feel worse. I'm more interested not in the why, but in how the problem is being maintained. Because if you can find how it's being maintained and stop that, guess what? The problem disappears. But there's no vehicle for that problem to hitchhike onto and take its journey. So the third principle here of non-attachment is very, very important. So how do we not attach to a thought? Well, you know, most people, what do? They try and push it away. They try and ignore it, or they become a victim of it by paying attention to it. Neither of those are any good. The best choice is to acknowledge it, but not acknowledge the content. There's a difference between the thought and what is being thought. The thought is a process, the thinking. That is natural. That has to be acknowledged and even appreciated because it's doing a great job. The thinking process is wonderful, of course, but it's the content of the thought that is the problem. So we want to continue attaching to the process of thinking, but not attached to the content that's telling us we're a failure or we can't do this or whatever, we should feel bad this way or whatever. And the way to do that is to focus not on trying to push the content away or get rid of it. Because that, you know, it grabs your attention, it keeps coming back. It's like opening the door to a salesperson. Once you've opened the door, they know you're home, they're going to try and sell something to you. And even if you slam the door in their face, they still know you're home, they're probably going to come back and knock again. That's exactly what a negative thought does. So that's no good. You don't want to try and push the thought away. And you certainly don't want to open the door to the thought. So what you need to do is acknowledge what is actually happening. And what is happening? What can you 100% be certain is happening? There's only one thing that you'll ever be able to be certain about. And that is the process. So if you think to yourself, my brain is having a thought. This brain is having a thought. Thinking is occurring. Thinking is occurring. You see, you're acknowledging the process because you can't stop that anyway. But you're not buying into or becoming a victim of the content of the process. And when you say to yourself, this brain's having a thought, what's happening? It's a statement of absolute fact and truth, where the content is often fantasy, beliefs, not even real. This is a result of programming over the years. So your statement of what the brain is actually doing rather than the content is actually stronger and true compared to the fantasy element of the content. So this is how we work. And this is in a Buddhist approach to hypnotherapy, this is what we do. We have compassion to build rapport and nurture the client and decide that we are there for them. Regardless of anything else, we want to make a difference to their life, not just fix their problem. We want them to be happy, healthy, have well-being. That's the result of our sessions. Number two, we look at how the brain processes information. How does it maintain the problem, the loop? That's dependent origination in Buddhism. And then lastly, non-attachment. So I've combined all of these, and I use this all the time with my hypnotherapy clients, but I also use it as a standalone approach, which I've called non-attachment therapy, because it's an appropriate name for the therapy. It's about not attaching to the problems and to the thoughts and the feelings, and it's incredibly successful. So I encourage you to think about these, and you can ask me any questions you want as well. I'd be only too keen to answer your questions and help you get on track if you want to learn more about this. Okay, if you're interested in learning more about the Buddhist psychology, I recommend the Abhidhamma, which is the Buddhist psychology. You'll find some books which summarize it because there are huge volumes. And please, you know, take this idea or these ideas and have a go with your clients. I think if you come up therapy using these principles, these three principles, you'll notice a remarkable difference, not only in what happens with the client, but in how you work, it'll save a lot of time to start with, and it'll get the job done. And often those changes are remarkable, and they happen actually during the session, and you see it happen, and the client feels it happen. So I encourage you to explore this further. Okay, well, this is Stephen Brooks saying thank you very much. I will continue to post some videos, mainly about Ericksonian hypnosis in the future, about language patterns and therapy techniques, Q&A type things. So I'll continue to do that, and look forward to maybe meeting you one day. Who knows? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.